Namaste, viewers. Welcome all to another session in this fifth year month-long celebration on account of Bhagavadpadacharya Adi Shankaracharya Jayanti Utsav. I will start the session by prayers and chanting few mantras. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Yasya Vedamayi Vani Yasya Devamayi Tanuhu Yasya Brahmamayi Drishti Saguru Patumam Sada Saguru Patumam Sada Saguru Patumam Sada Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shlokardhena Pravakshyami Yaduktam Grantha Kotivihi Brahma Satyam Jaganmithya Jivo Brahma Ivana Paraha Jyotistava Bhanumana Hanime Ratro Pradipadikam Syadevam Ravideepa Darshana Vidau Jyotirakya Hime Chakshustasya Nimilanadi Samaye Kindhim Diyo Darshane Kintatrahamato Bhavan Paramakam Jyotistadasmit Prabho Na nirodho na chotpattir na baddho na cha sadhakaha na mumukshur na vaimukta ityesha paramarthata. Hari Om. Today we are lucky to have Babaji Bob Kindler to give us a lecture on Chatushpad or Brahmapada. Babaji Bob Kindler began his formal spiritual training in yoga and Vedanta in 1970 at the age of 20. After more than a decade of spiritual austerities and extensive study of scriptures in Eastern traditions, he received the initiation from Ramakrishna lineage by Swami Asheshananda, a direct disciple of Sri Sharda Devi, wife and spiritual consort of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. He also received the guidance and instructions from Swami Nityaswarupananda, another direct disciple of Holy Mother, and training in ritualistic worship from Swami Damodarananda, both of the Ramakrishna order as well. Babaji's emergence as a teacher of Sanatana Dharma occurred naturally with the creation of Jai Ma music, an acclaimed sacred art ensemble, which he found in 1980 as a vehicle for exalted teachings of India through wisdom-oriented devotional music. He also received encouragement from his friend Lex Hickson, the instigating force and co-founder of the National SRV Association of West, based in New York State. Over to you, Babaji.
Thank you very much, Sanjeev ji. Very grateful to be able to appear, I think, maybe for the third time here at the Global Festival of Oneness, and asked to give a discourse on the great teacher Adi Shankaracharya. And for this subject, I have chosen the Brahmapada, how Brahman disports itself, that is, how divine reality moves around through living beings, which is a sort of contradiction in terms we know Brahman is immovable and stationary, but somehow, as the Upanishads say, it becomes manifest. It's a indeterminable mass of pure conscious awareness, according to Shankara, but it being ever stationary, it becomes movable. And probably the best way to understand this, I think, the closest and most intimate and natural way to understand this is through one's states of consciousness. We know Brahman is not an object, it's the eternal subject. We know that Brahman is not in time, it's the eternal moment. And we know Brahman's not in space, it's the eternal location. And therefore, we look to this subtlemost principle of the Upanishads through our own states of awareness. That is, through what is called today by most people, at least in English, as waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, or Jagrat, Swapna, and Sushupti in Sanskrit. And the great guru of Shankara's guru, that is Gaudapada, has brought out those teachings in the Karaka. I was very fortunate to be up the Columbia River Gorge just a few days ago, giving a 3-day retreat to some 20 students on Gaudapada's Karaka, and also next side by side with Tibetan Buddhist teaching of Mahamudra by the great Mahasiddha Tilopa, who passed this wisdom on to Naropa. And then it found its way from those two Indian yogis into Tibet through Marpa and Milarepa. And we were all in wonderment about the closeness of these teachings, which Gaudapada calls ajati, or non-origination, and Tilopa's Mahamudra and its beautiful mind-only school view. So all of this is sort of primed me for being able to appear here and present to you in the most easy and natural fashion, I hope, without being too philosophically thick or difficult, through this natural state of one's own waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states. So this has been reported in Gaudapada's Karaka and commented on by Shankara in great scriptures like the Vivekachudamani. The most easy way to see both the existence of Brahman and to find out how it, as we just said, disports itself through human beings. We, in India, as we all know, we always salute the humankind and the subhuman creatures, and we salute the ancestors, and we salute the gods and goddesses, and we salute the Trinity, and we salute the aspect of God with form, like Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and then we salute the formless Brahman as well. So all levels of divine existence are brought into play here for our contemplation, for our deepest contemplation. And then it may escape us, though, that as we look at all these levels of being that are probably convincing us of the beginnings and middles and endings of existence, that this eternal Brahman disappears from sight. It's behind the scenes. In Vedanta, as you know, great teachers like Shankara have brought this out not only in the teaching of the three gunas, tamas, rajas, and sattva, but also as the veiling power of the divine, and as the distorting power, that's avarana and vikshepa shakti, and then less often mentioned, the revelatory power, prakasha shakti. So we look for that prakasha shakti to shed some light on this subtlemost of all things. And as usual, I've come prepared with a few images for you to look at as we look at this beautiful principle of how divine reality sports through our own states of awareness. I guess what I'm trying to bring forth here mainly is how natural it is to see this formless Brahman existing in and in everything, and moving in an immovable way and speaking to us in a silent way through our own states of consciousness. I think this is one of the most unique ways in which we seek for and discover the existence of Brahman and its presence in our own hearts and mind. So Brahmapada, that's called, the 4 feet of Brahman, as if waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and what's beyond them called Turiya, the 4th state, is a supremely natural way in which we can look within and without to see Brahman sporting in all of existence, and that will put a lot of our doubts and fears to rest. We won't have any contentions or any problems with the existence of Brahman, at least, which is, of course, one of the great stumbling blocks in the Western world today and in terms of atheism. So in this way, we can find that the most important issue that we're facing is that the existence or non-existence of Brahman. And far short of a non-dual view, most beings are going to have to understand this in terms of some kind of subtle duality, like in terms of bondage and liberation, or form and formlessness. So I want to show you this chart about Brahmapada that I created for this purpose, and we can see more readily and clearly what I'm talking about here. I said that Brahman is most subtle. Anaranian is the Sanskrit word for that. It's the subtlemost of the most subtle. And in order to describe that to people, my Param Guru, Shisharda Devi, made an interesting statement once by saying, "A flash of lightning can be seen in the window pane, but not in the wooden shutters." So in rather Zen koan-like fashion or style, we can see that she's inferring that light can be seen in what's most clear, but that which is veiling it, it doesn't tend to come through. So you can see in the image here these bolts of lightning going off in the sky behind and the window frame around it. And you can see the assignments there. Ishvari is one of those bolts of lightning. That's, of course, the highest concept of God with form that the human mind can comprehend. That's a quote directly from Swami Vivekananda. And maybe lesser lights would be the sadhakas, the practitioners of yoga and Vedanta, and the devotees themselves who come close to Lord through the path of bhakti. And then, of course, the light of pure conscious awareness, which is what we're talking about here, Brahman, how it can find its way into these states of awareness, like waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. And then the realized seers and illumined souls are there in the picture too, like Shankara himself. We would go to him, like in his Viveka Chudamani, he said, some have never heard of the Atman, others, though they've heard of the Atman, fail to comprehend it. But wonderful is the one who speaks of the Atman, and very fortunate is that one who hears of the Atman, but extremely blessed is that one who hears from the Atman from the lips of an illumined perceptor. So we would go close to great teachers like Shankara and his lineage of Govindapada and Gaudapada to hear of Brahman in the most certain terms. And so in those Advaita Vedanta schools, we're calling non-duality these days, we're finding out that that this Brahman can be realized by those minds that are full of light, like lit up by these lightning bolts of pure awareness, pure understanding. Whereas we also have this conundrum of beings not seeing that light, not attesting to the presence of Brahman, and coming up even with non-belief of anything beyond matter, objects, senses, possessions and so forth. So this beautiful saying of Holy Mother, Sri Sharda Devi, is a flash of lightning can be seen in a window pane, but not in the wooden shutters. So this is why certain beings can open up to the truth if they purify their mind and senses and practice yoga and come to the understanding of Vedanta, and maybe even become qualified to understand Advaita Vedanta, which is a very, very subtle level of comprehension. One would have to approach that state beyond deep sleep with the chakras all open, especially the Agya chakra in the third eye, have that open to see this light of Brahman, and then could trace it like a bolt of lightning, as it were, through all the other chakras, through all the other centers of awareness. And whereas other beings, we call them ordinary souls, or let's say unawakened to the presence of the Lord or God or Spirit or Brahman or Buddha nature, are just not going to have that access to the light of Brahman. And so there are ways in which this Brahman would disport itself through waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. It's much like in-breath, held breath, and out-breath that we study sometimes and practice in the eight-limbed yoga called pranayama. The in-breath is like a new birth every time. It's a new life. And then the held breath, kumbhaka, is sustaining that at a very high level of awareness. And then the out-breath would be like dissolving everything of a negative type, which came to you in a lifetime, in that sustenance of a lifetime. So that's why Shankara said, and gave us that beautiful breathing exercise: breathe in, I am Brahman. And when you hold the breath, say, I will always be Brahman. And then when you breathe out, say to yourself, I am not the world. So I'm not the world of false objects and false pursuits and hollow desires and sufferings. And in that way, every time we take a breath, become aware of the presence of Brahman coursing through everything. And then you go through into a deeper state, and you find out in your deep sleep, in your dream, that you're coming closer and closer to that ocean of Brahman. And in that way, begin to open up inwardly. You can see the quote down below by Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa on this chart. He says, Brahman is both within and without. From within, he creates the various states of mind. The scriptures thus say that Brahman himself has become the 24 cosmic principles. Therefore, I say, worship Brahman both inside and out. That's a very good way of starting us out on this attempt and this inner journey to see Brahman in everything, because most beings are going to start out from the outside, from the five senses and the mind. This is why Shankara says, Mano nabudi shariram indran tanmatram bhutani nabhuta panchakam aham kritas chapi viyat swarupakam tam ishamatmanam upuiti shashvatam. He goes on and on with his beautiful slokas in the Vivekachudamani about in order to see Brahman, you should dissolve the mind and the intellect, and dissolve the subtle bodies and the causal body, and dissolve all the subtle elements and the gross elements, the tanmatras and the pancha mahabhutas. Along with, he says, aham kritas chapi, along with the ego, into that state of oneness with Brahman. In another part of the same scripture, he says, Yacha nyachatmanu tam nyacha buddha diyam yacha cha buddhi shakshini. He wants you to become a witness of these things, sakshini, and become a witness of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Happens to practitioners at a certain part of their sadhana. Maybe even some of us have had the unique experience of dreaming, and all of a sudden we realize that we're dreaming, and at that moment we're tired of the dream, and we simply tell ourselves, wake up, and then we are immediately back in the waking state again. I've had some of my students tell me that they've had that unique experience. So this is all a result of the practice of non-dual awareness and holding it sacrosanct in all levels of existence, without, within, and beyond. So in this beautiful quote by Sri Ramakrishna, taken from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, they say in the scriptures, he says that Brahman has become the 24 cosmic principles. Well, it's not really your most Advaitic teaching. We'd probably have to call it Vishishta Advaita, coming from a qualified non-dual state. Nonetheless, it was one of Sri Ramakrishna's favorite perspectives to take if he was still in the body. Once he was in nirvikalpa samadhi, or a higher state of mind, then, of course, all the tattvas get merged, as I was just chanting, back into the source. And those tattvas are multiple. We were having a beautiful satsang in Oregon last few days when I was there, and talking about, at that time, I brought the Varaha Upanishad. Unfortunately, Shankara didn't have time in his short lifetime to make a commentary on that particular Upanishad. But right at the very beginning, it talks about the 24 cosmic principles. And it says, some say there are 24 cosmic principles, some say there are 36. Some say there are 96. And so we looked into the first chapter of that Upanishad and found out about the 96 cosmic principles, mostly unknown to Samkhya Yoga and so forth, and goes beyond even what Shaivism has added to these tattvas. Now, tattvas are basically these principles. I like to call them stepping stones from which we, or Brahman as us, came out of formlessness and made our way into the worlds of name and form. There is the jiva, who's one with Brahman, and in order to get down into the worlds of name and form, must have platforms. So consciousness will project these platforms out of its own mind, starting with Lord Brahma and working itself down, and then take steps down through the firmaments, through the different atmospheres. The 5 atmospheres were 5 of those 96 cosmic principles that the Varaha Upanishad was talking about. And also 3 kinds of mind came in, and also 3 bodies came in. These are all things that, of course, we never learned in the West here. This is called the Adi Daiva Vidya in India. It's like ancient knowledge, and at least in older times, they accepted this as the eternal Adi Daiva, divine Vidya knowledge. And so it's an eternal knowledge that exists even today that we can take recourse to. We should take recourse to it in order to understand the all-pervasive presence of Brahman in everything. Again, not a thing, but in everything. So in order to illustrate that, and looking, I think, still at this chart, we can see what we mean by something like 96 cosmic principles into which Brahman comes in the form of our own awareness. Again, when Shankara says, dissolve the word into the mind into the intellect into the ego into the witness. Witness is very important. And then dissolve the witness into the Atman. And then dissolve all of those, Atman and all of them, into Brahman. Because Brahman is the soul in everything. That's the soul with a capital S. So this is, again, a slightly more expanded way of explaining how Brahman comes into our states of awareness. And these are divided threefold, as we were saying. Sushupti is deep sleep state. So out of formless awareness, you come into deep sleep state, and if you were aware, you would see all the seeds for everything there. There's seeds for rebirth. There are seeds for trees, and there are seeds for the 5 elements: air, earth, fire, water, and ether, which are eternal principles that are very sacred. You'd have to be treating those 5 elements here on earth very sacred in order to understand and live up to this teaching. So all of these are ways in which Brahman can see and express itself through these various tattvas. So seeing this chart again, you can see Brahman at the very top of that loop. And if you go to the left, you see the first thing you would see, of course, was Om, A-U-M. And A-U-M, of course, the great word, is the origin of all other things. So in that way, A, they say, is aligned with waking, U is aligned with deep sleep, and M is, with dreaming, and M is aligned with deep sleep. So the word itself is speaking through the teachings of Advaita Vedanta, is telling us that waking, dreaming, and deep sleep are ways in which Brahman disports itself through all beings, through the jivas. The jivas, of course, are pure sentiency. They're unoriginated. They're eternal. And everything is eternal, but the jivas happen to be sentient, whereas the tattvas happen to be insentient. So this is why Purusha gets used by Prakriti and the old Samkhya system. So if you see this loop that I'm talking about underneath the window pane on this chart, you can see Brahman is at the top of all of these cycles, or all of these loops in consciousness. Go off to the left, the first thing you would find would be the word. And inside that word is this teaching of deep sleep, dreaming, and waking. And this is something that happens to us every 24 hours. But miraculously, it's something that over centuries, millennia, and many, many lifetimes, many people don't awaken to the fact that the word is sacred and holds everything in it. The A holds everything external, objective, and the U holds everything in the mind, which gave rise to everything external, which is the subjective reality, actually millions of subjective realities, Bhagavadpadacharya says in his Karika. And then in deep sleep, it all gets taken back to a formless state called pragya, where wisdom is prevalent. And most beings will then have that experience of deep sleep in a very deep and relaxed way, return back to dreaming, taking the seeds of deep sleep back into form. And this is, of course, a dream form, like dream water, dream air, dream fire, dream earth, and so forth. And then we'll wake up, and in a flash, in just a matter of a split second, we'll turn everything solid again. And so it's going in and out of these states every 24 hours. Consciousness is disporting itself through these 3 levels of consciousness. Most natural, but very hard to discern for beings who are seeking the source of it. Most beings aren't seeking or even aware of or curious about the source of expression of God with form from the formless outward and back into its source. It's doing this every breath. It's doing this every 24 hours. It's doing this every lifetime. It's doing this every yuga. It's doing this every Mahayuga. Just as if Lord Brahma was taking that big breath, and it takes thousands of years is a day of Brahma. 1,000 nights is also a day of Brahma. That's listed in the scriptures. So the real import of it is that it's all unoriginated. That's all eternal. It's going on all the time. You can't find a beginning, middle, and end to it because nobody knows the posteriority or the priority of cause and effect. What happened with the first cause? Like in the West, people are thinking about the Big Bang, but they really should be thinking about the big thought, because the big thought, if anything, caused the Big Bang. There had to be something that that gave rise to that explosion of, or implosion, if you want to call it that, of energy that caused the physical universe to be born and to be created, as they say. So this is exactly the absence of any proof of what happened before cause and after the last effect is exactly the method by which they teach non-origination, or the eternal nature of everything. So these are beautiful high thoughts that will shed some light, like these bolts of lightning, upon the inner terrain that we go into every night, so that we can light up our dreams and have what they have been calling over the last 20 years here in the West, lucid dreams. And then also bring enlightenment into our deep sleep state, that is, see ourselves as a formless entity, essentially. Deep sleep is like a rehearsal for samadhi. You get used to being all pervasive, formless, and infinite and eternal. And like Shankara says, like a hailstone that fell into an ocean. That beautiful swell of the Atman off at the breast of the ocean, in which my mind fell like a hailstone, Shankara says, and then became one with the entire ocean of consciousness. That's the kind of thinking, or beyond thinking, that gives what he called vilapya shantim and paramabhajasva. That is, those who have that kind of experience have this eternal peace come to them. And then they also have this paramabhajasva. They have this realization of their eternal nature. They have ecstatic bliss. So eternal peace and ecstatic bliss are what await those beings who understand that the A of Om, the external worlds, are not all that exists. That you have to connect those to the U of Om, which is in the mind. And then you have to connect those two to the M of Om, which is, again, a dissolution of everything into the formless Brahman. So our in-breath, our held breath, our out-breath, our day, our night, our sleeping, awakening, and going into deep sleep, all have to do with this divine memory of the eternity of our awareness, the ongoing nature of it. With no beginnings, middles, and ends, the unoriginated nature of it all. So all of this is held in that word Om. If you go off to the left, you can see the Trimurti comes next, or that means Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, of course, which we just chanted about at the beginning of the class. And then down from the Trimurti, that is down and out, comes the avatar, these great souls who come to us from Ram to Krishna to Ramakrishna, we like to say in S.R. Vedam, and bring us this truth, both as expression and as exemplification. That is, they exemplify this divine truth to us right there in their very body, because they can sport lila, see, and as they sport, they use the Maya instead of getting used by Maya. They use the Maya for the purposes of divine sport, and then, of course, the many lokas come forth. Those are the different worlds in time and space, and all based upon that bottom of the cycle there, sankalpa and vikalpa. If you go back up to Brahman again and take a different look at it from the standpoint of the more ancient scriptures, you see that there's, of course, the Mahashakti herself, Purusham Artam Shunyanam Gunanam Prati Prashavaha, the father of yoga, says, Chitti Shakti iti, he says. She's that great Mahashakti who strips away all of nature and returns the soul to its spiritual emancipation And she does this so that they can reach the highest state of awareness. So this deep intelligence, this burning fire of intelligence, which is the Mahashakti, faster than the speed of sound, faster than the speed of light, faster than the speed of thought even, is there as the underlying principle, and making sure that the soul can disport itself through all of these various manifestations cited in the 24, 36, and 96 cosmic principles, and then take the soul back to its eternal rest again, all without any birth, growth, death going on, all without any beginning, middle, and end happening, and in a breathless state of kumbhaka. All of these tattvas expressing in one eternal moment, and then this Mahashakti sporting on this field with all of her precious spiritual children. Behold the mother who so enchants the universe and attracts all beings to her. About her blissful lotus feet, bands of ecstatic holy men and women are dancing in ecstasy. Brothers and sisters, I humbly beseech you to chant the mother's praises and names. We have a beautiful song in India by Prem Das, which gives out these beautiful teachings. So out of that Mahashakti then we find Ishvara or Ishvari, again, the highest rendering of form that the human mind can comprehend. And then the Mahat, in more Samkhya terms, would be that great mind out of which all these things rise and fall continually, as the Buddhists say. Paticca samutpada, it's a continual rising of thought and then turning into forms, and then the continual dissolving back into the same ocean of mind. And this is happening all the time without origination and in an eternal moment. So Shankara's teacher's teacher says that's why the great yogis don't want to wave the firebrand of the intellect. They want to keep it still. You take a firebrand and wave it, called alatashanti in the teachings of Gaudapada, then all of these appearances happen in the firebrand in the wind. And people then are all of a sudden imagining something is there that isn't really there, or that's inherent in the source. And they give it a life of its own outside of reason. But to keep that firebrand still, like a candle in a windless place, Patanjali says in the Yoga Sutras, is what we're talking about when we find out that the Mahat, or the deep sleep state, again, making the correlation, has all these vibrations in it, all these vrittis. So that's called the Vijnana by Gaudapada. It's called Chitta Vrittis by Patanjali in yoga. Very much the same thing. So keeping these vrittis under control, this Vijnana from vibrating, then you have a very beautiful mind like Lord Brahma's, called the Mahat, out of which all of this just rises and falls naturally. Wherein those beings that are in possession of the consciousness of that great mind of Lord Brahma are having that eternal peace and that ecstatic bliss come to them during their lives, or at least by the end of their lives, or in any given lifetime where enlightenment takes place, as to the nature of Brahman disporting through everything. If you move on in that, then you see out of the Mahat comes all of nature, all of Prakriti is there. We just chanted at the beginning here, Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnat Purnamudachyate. This means that everything that is within is infinite, and then everything that came out of what was within appears to be finite, but in its finitude, it's also infinite. From the infinite, the finite has come. Yet since the finite is also infinite, in the end, only infinite remains. That's the implication of everything is, Purnamadaha. So that's the idea here with both the soul and nature, which are unoriginated according to Shankara's school of highest thought and deepest wisdom. And then you have the unmanifested nature turning into manifested nature. It sounds very much to us like deep sleep turning into dream. And all the seeds for everything are in the mind. And remember, we're talking about this being a sport of the absolute coming through our own states of awareness, so that if you were to become aware of Brahman, or if you were to realize your Atman, if you were to become enlightened, and if you were to awaken to the highest reality in the different ways in which this is being put, then you would automatically see your three states lit up like this lightning bolts in this chart. And the way the seers see it, and the way it's seen by the sadhakas, and the way in which it's known by Ishvara and the Divine Mother of the Universe, light up all states of your awareness, and so that you'll find a great soul like Shankara walking around in this state when he's a mere teenager, and remembering all the scriptures when he was 8 years of age. An amazing spiritual phenomena in India. Of course, India is full of spiritual phenomena, and many Jesuses have been born there in India and have sported like this in full consciousness. So that's all has to do with this pure mind. The next assignment there on that loop is called Antakarana. So that's the fourfold mind which can find itself in trouble. You see that the inner fourfold mind consists of duality. The mind seems to always attach to good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, virtue and vice. A whole sets of dualities come out of it. And so that's the mind we're trying to turn non-dual, that Shankara and Gaudapada and his Karka are trying to convince us of this superiority of the non-dual approach, so that these dualities, especially those ones that are not helpful to us anymore, if they become outmoded and outdated for a soul who's gaining enlightenment by stages, those will disappear and the mind will be returned to its natural state again. Sri Ramakrishna used to talk about that, the difference between ordinary mind and original mind. So if you hear Brahman can't be realized by the mind, then you should probably take exception to that statement. No, it can be realized by the original mind. It just cannot be realized by the ordinary mind. The shutters in this picture are the ordinary mind. Lightning doesn't reflect in them. It only reflects in the pane of glass. That's what your mind has to be like a clear third eye, like a clear Vishuddha chakra that speaks truth and hears only truth, like a pure heart chakra, anahata, which loves God first and foremost, and all beings as thyself, as Jesus said. So all of these teachings come forth pronounced in that way when the mind becomes pure. And when the mind becomes pure, then the other three aspects of the mind, which are intellect and ego and thought, become pure as well. That is, it happens in different orders for different people. But if the intellect, the wise, favor jnana, wisdom, Gaudapada says in his Karka, the wise favor jnana, wisdom, or atmagyan, for turning the mind towards Brahman. Those Vivekananda, when he was alive too, said that all four yogas are good paths. You can imagine how long it would take to attain Brahman, like karma yoga. Shankara has things to say about that too, in the Vivekachudamani. You can probably say that the path of Bhakti Yoga is a beautiful way to God, but it's the long, slow boat to India, as you might say. But if you can get the intellect honed and sharpened and understand the nature of what we're talking about here, like Brahman is my own three states of consciousness, I'm not separate from Brahman. Brahman's not separate from me. There never was a time when I was separate from Brahman. There will never come a time when I'm separate from Brahman. I am that. Tattvamasi. I and my Father are one. And start developing this stance of higher wisdom. Then you'll see everything fall into place much quicker. That's why Vivekananda said, that's the sword stroke of the Divine Mother of the Universe. She loves wisdom most, first and foremost of all. And that's why she's called the Vakdevi, or the goddess of wisdom. She resides in all the words. Mantranam Jivabhuta Tulya Shmita Shakti Rupaya. Vararoha. The beautiful statements in the Tantras say that she resides in all the words, in all the mantras. And she is the perfect I consciousness that is without fault and pure and perfect. And she manifests herself through all of the revealed scriptures, their slokas, their sutras, and so forth. And so then we turn to her, put our minds on this wisdom, which is the eternal divine wisdom, is the Adi Daiva Vidya. And then she comes to us in the form of wisdom and reveals to us the truth of the scriptures. The mind becomes free of all its shortcomings and its faults, and the ordinary mind readily and soon turns into the original mind. The 5 Akashas are listed next. Again, good that we had Upanishads like the Varaha Upanishad I was just talking about earlier, is that in the West we have one body, we have one space, we have one state of awareness. That is, one body is physical, the one space is physical. So to find out that the ancient rishis have told us about 5 kinds of space is very enlightening to hear. And find out that we have 3 bodies rather than just one body is very uplifting for people here in the West. And they start thinking in terms of the ancient wisdom that was realized by the luminaries of Mother India. And then that original divine knowledge awakens in them, in their divine memory. Smriti Rupanaya, as the Chandi says, Vyapyasta Jajagad, Namastasya, 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 Namama. So we turn to the Mother of Wisdom who enlightens us, causes us to remember this divine wisdom, which is eternal, and out of which all of this has been fashioned. So that very soon you'll be looking at all of Prakriti, all of nature is just solidified wisdom. Holy Mother, whose quotes there at the top about the window pane and the wooden shutters, would often say that. She'd say that objects are just thought made manifest, made concretized. So again, the connection from matter back to mind is not being very clearly made in this day and time, particularly in the West. So that's why, as you just heard, my own path to this began when I was 19 or 20, and it began by hearing wisdom like that all of this Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, everything external was connected back to the mind's thoughts, the mind's vibrations. And then you began to look in terms of involution rather than just evolution. And some of these myths that science is holding up, materialistic science is holding up, get debunked. And you start connecting to your own consciousness as the author of this, of all of this that's here. You begin taking responsibility for it, and you begin to see it as a way to get beyond cause and effect, and move from waking, dreaming, and deep sleep into Brahman in your deepest meditation. Otherwise, at the bottom of this loop we were just studying for the last half hour or so, you see sankalpa, vikalpa is there. It's what Krishna says in the Gita. O Arjuna, nobody can become a yogi, an illumined soul, without going beyond sankalpa and vikalpa. That is, without going beyond mental projections using the ordinary mind and filled with desires, vikalpa. That has to be transcended if you want to see this light. Otherwise, it might as well be more possible to see the lightning reflected in a wooden shutter than in a wooden pane. As time is running out in this short discourse, looking at waking, dreaming, and deep sleep and how natural that is to look at the existence and the presence of divine reality called Brahman in us, I want to show you this final chart quickly about how to perceive Atman in everything. So one more look at this in part, at least, in the remaining minutes. And we'll see here that it's going to take some readiness on the part of particularly the contemporary practitioner of this day and time, and then some preparation, and then some follow-through. But it's going to be well worth it. And you can see here the quote, for instance, all beings should hear at the outset that they are the Atman. And then immediately they must be taught the means to realize it. So that's very important. For on earth and in heaven, Atman lies hidden, like gold in mountain streams, or oil in sesame seeds. Until this realization dawns on the mind, one should affirm. I am not Atman until I realize I am Atman. So we find out the very powerful statement of great souls like this, to follow the way of Brahman until that realization dawns. So as far as consciousness getting into our own waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states, you can see here, possibly from the top down, there again on the right column is Om, the primal sound, the pranava, it's called in Gaudapada's Karika. And remember, AUM is correlated directly with our waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states. And then beyond that would be Turiya, which should be Brahman itself. And then the Trinity is featured under that. You can imagine then consciousness, like the fire intelligence, being the first out the gate, as Vivekananda said. The first thing out of the gate of the word is the fire of intelligence. And that burning intelligence, called Gyanamatras, or particles of pure intelligence, are coming off of Om and infusing the Trinity with all of the power of pure intelligence. And then after that, you can see image of Avatar there, and from Rama to Krishna to Ramakrishna. And then, as I said earlier, the ancestors, we could see Brahman manifesting through our ancestors and worship them accordingly. The Pitris are called. And then humankind. And then the lokas, and the universe and space and time that we live in. All the various worlds that are aligned with the 7 chakras or 7 lokas are all reflecting Brahman. All of them are reflecting Brahman to different degrees of intensity. And so we would remove the false notion then that Brahman cannot be seen here, Brahman cannot be realized here. It's just that we have to have the readiness, the preparation, and the follow-through to awaken our divine memory. Because there's so much called Vismriti. Vismriti is like forgetfulness. So you want to have this Daiva Smriti, this divine remembrance of these things, which will come about, again, by studying them and by seeing their place in order of things. sancharaha, prati sancharaha. There's an order of all these tattvas from inside out, and then a return order from everything outside back in. So even short of Advaitic realization, India gives us evolution plus involution, which science is failing to give to us in this day and age, and which religion is falling short of conventional religion taking us to heaven rather than beyond the heavens and to higher states of awareness. And so this is what's very important about waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, and Turiya as well, is that this is happening from inside out and from turning it back from outside in. It must be obvious to us by now that this is the case, because we wake and dream and go into deep sleep every day and return through the same avenues to waking. So if we can look at these three worlds, or these three bodies, that is the stula sharira, the sukshma sharira, and the karana sharira, our body, our mind, and our indeterminate state called deep sleep, and acknowledge them all as stations, like stepping stones upon which Brahman moves from its formless light into the tempered light of various tattvas or various principles, then we can follow the movement, the so-called movement of the immovable. And it can be explained to us, the existence of the unborn by the unborn, as Bhagavadpada says in his Karika. So I wish we had more time. I had at least 3 more charts to show you, but I'd like to show you a chart I created for the Oneness Festival 2 years ago about Shankara in the last 3 minutes. So I will bid you adieu here. Aloha for, that means love in Hawaii. And namaste to all of you as you see this chart in the last 3 minutes of my discourse here. We'll be in silence as we see some of Shankara's great scriptures to study and some of the great attainments that he had in his life.
Babaji.
Babaji, thank you very much for explaining us lucidly what and how of Prapanchopashamam in the 7th mantra of Mandukya Upanishad by taking the help of Chatushpad, Chaturthapad, Turiyapad or Brahmapad as a source code for explaining all the cognitions in all the 3 avasthas, Jagrata, Swapna and Sushupti, as a source code for Prapanchopashamam. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the lucid explanation. In the evening, viewers, we have Shastra Adhyayan as a spiritual practice by Gauri Mahulikar. I will offer the prayers and close the session. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.